Modern Warfare certainly earned its stripes last year. It's the series reinvention I'd honestly been waiting years for. Bigger, more versatile in its modes, and even on a micro level, more detailed thanks to optimizations behind the scenes. But even so, there's so much Infinity Ward can still do with this new engine. One of the main requests? Well, forging a closer link to the original games, in particular Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare from 2007. And now we have a genuine answer to that. Released ahead of the festive season, Modern Warfare taps into its legacy with 3 maps from Call of Duty 4, Crash, Vacant and Shipment. Far from being copy-pasted directly, each legendary area is built on the developer's latest rendering tech, and the results are really surprisingly faithful, at least to a point. There's a swathe of things that the engine does to push it beyond the original designs. These are, after all, classic maps on new technology, but to what extent does it result in a new experience? And I suppose the more complex twist to this is how do these reboot versions differ from the updated maps we saw in the Modern Warfare Remaster in 2016? Let's take a look. Now, hats off to developer Infinity Ward for their restraint on this. In rebooting the series engine, the team pushed for entirely new locations from the start, and rightly so I think. It's only fair that this gets showcased with areas designed for it to bring the best out of it. The Piccadilly stage, for instance, shines for giving a photorealistic take on London. Night vision goggles, larger areas and volumetric lighting all get time in the sun too, depending on the map. Not just in its campaign, but also the multiplayer. Everything has a place in the playlist rotation. What these returning Modern Warfare maps do instead then is simply make the technical upgrade easier to see in direct comparison. So what do we have? Well, switching between the 2007 original and the 2019 reboot, the layouts are clearly based on the same blueprint, though the use of proper, physically based materials and lighting mark a big change. I've taken the Xbox One X version to show off the new rebooted game, gunning for that 4K output with a reconstructed image. It looks as excellent as ever. Meanwhile, here's Xbox 360 running these exact same levels as we saw them on console 13 years ago, only in that case running at 600p with 4 times MSAA. Sure, we have the PC version too, but really I thought this would be fun as something of a showcase of how far consoles have come in their delivery. And what a difference those years make too. In all honesty, the original designs still look authentic and rich with detail. It's surprising how well they hold up even without the advances in lighting and post effects. It also speaks to the way Infinity Ward gunned for materials that blended effectively into the scene back in the day. The properties of each concrete slab, brick and wood support were baked in, but they were nonetheless convincing for the day, and you know what, they kind of worked at the low output resolution. Each map still looked gritty, modern and above all natural to the eye, while letting these machines run at 60 FPS. Really the only drawback playing today is that grass. You can't really help but notice. The foliage is full of fine subpixel detail, and on such a low resolution on 360, the MSAA doesn't really address it, which creates a lot of shimmer. Something obviously solved on PC's higher resolutions. So let's take it from the beginning. Crash is the highlight. It's laid with so many small points of interest, from the new opening descent from a helicopter to new shop signs dotted over the landing spot. There's a sense these maps were built with last generation RAM budgets and GPU clock speeds in mind, for textures and geometry while keeping 60 FPS as a goal. As such, perhaps not everything that appeared on the concept sheet would make it to the final in-game design, but it still looked incredible. What we have in the rebooted Modern Warfare though gives us a radical upheaval in so many ways. Textures are higher resolution as you'd expect, motion blur is added and light shafts flicker through gaps in windows. And not to mention the use of reflection maps on the ground. Every single point of the geometry is also clearly overhauled, sometimes radically so, with new designs for those arches. Debris, plant life and building supports, everything is remodeled. Put side by side, it's a massive game of spot the difference. overlooking the huge gulf in image quality, it goes a long way past what the 2016 Remaster did as well. Of course, there's a step in between the original and 2019 Reboot versions of these maps here, which we'll slot in the middle. Developer Raven Software adapted the original game in 2016, of course. This used the same geometric framework, largely, but added higher res textures with physically based properties, plus a form of volumetric dust clouds. It comes across on a map like Crash, where even shadow positions are identical between the 2007 and 2016 Remaster. The Reboot, though, takes its own path, introducing things like fully dynamic body shadows from the player relative to the sun's position. And meanwhile, there are new lights added across the scene which affect it. Oh, and there's a swathe of new physics-based objects dotted around the scene, notably interiors. It's a very different beast. The 2016 Remaster then is a very literal translation. It's the old game with a new lick of paint, whereas the 2019 Reboot makes massive wholesale changes. It's a ground-up reworking, and it's clear to see in the way it now actually plays. For one, there are updates in the map layout itself. New areas are opened up in Crash, like the landing zone, a chunk of the map now accessible right away. There are even new buildings in Vacant that you can explore, and entire areas are rearranged for balance. One of the most notable to me, and I'm sure you'll have too, is this rooftop section of Crash, famously a good sniping spot. In the original game you could run around the stairwell, but for whatever reason it's now been closed off in the Reboot. The rebooted maps are full of tweaks like this. That's not to mention the new door mechanic, with players now allowed to barge or slowly peek through the entrance of each building. It's a small nitpick, but it's interesting to note that every map in the original Call of Duty 4 had a kind of colour signature, a distinctive hue of green or brown or grey that made it distinct from the last. The Reboot seems to forego that entirely, which is a bit of a shame in my mind. The green tone of Vacant, for example, is cut out, and all round it's a more vividly colourful area than anyone remembers it being. In fact, the warehouse interior is lined with bright yellow radioactive signs. Sure, it's beautifully rendered and gives it character, but for a more authentic take, the Remaster from 2016 gets closer to the original intent. All of these maps are absolute classics. It doesn't stop there either though. Another small scale map called Cargo was added in the same bundle, a kind of nod to the opening level of the original's campaign. That is, even if the multiplayer mode back then never got this map exactly. Again, we've come a long way in terms of the lighting and materials, and it's great to see Infinity Ward cementing this as a true part of the Modern Warfare line. We perhaps needed these maps to feel that connection. Does this make the Remaster from a few years ago surplus then? Well, hardly. There's still so many maps going untouched here. For the most faithful experience, the 2016 Remaster still genuinely has a place today. Even so, I'd love to see the likes of, say, Backlot or Crossfire get the extra special treatment in the Reboot. What we have already is clearly a labour of love. The detailing across the map is a leap ahead of what Raven's work could do, just by virtue of using newer tech with more flexible lighting. Even looking at a small map like Shipment, it gives Infinity Ward a chance to reimagine the entire scene far more radically. Also, as an aside, I love that the assets are consistent with the time period COD 4 was set in. Hence these lovely big chunky CRTs stacked up right here. Of course, other maps were added to the roster in the same wave as these. Atrium is a new tight-knit map designed with a fast time to death in mind. And then there's the Port of Verdansk, a large ground war map that runs along a narrow stretch. Plenty has been added to the game since launch then, and it doesn't seem like there's a sign of the well running dry. As far as the comparisons go, well, there's a fun twist in seeing one more flavour of Crash in action. Almost contrary to the work of the Reboot, developer Tencent produced a Call of Duty mobile port with an identical layout to the original. It's funny to see this in action after all we've covered here. The low resolution textures have an almost papier-mâché quality, but in fairness, it does make sense given the mobile constraints. For the best-in-class version of all these maps, revitalised by the engine's new gameplay mechanics, all eyes are on what Infinity Ward will do next. As a way to gauge the progress of Call of Duty's tech, these maps have been incredibly useful. It's rare to see the same spot reimagined in so many different ways, by different teams. But that's all I have time for today. If you enjoyed this quick look, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality pristine version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.